Here is a brief summary of St Maximino. This is from a document obtained upon a visit to the shrine of St Maximino in St Hyacinth in North Royalton, Ohio, at the Monastery of Holy Protection of the Byzantine Poor Clare nuns. At the time when Diocletian's persecution broke out, St Maximina and her husband Montanus, a priest, were living in Belgrade, in the Roman province of Illyria, the ancient name for Yugoslavia. This was long before the law of celibacy was introduced into the Western Church. It is not known if the young priest and his lovely wife were born in Belgrade or when they came to live there. All that is recorded concerning this is that they were living there when the vicious and cruel persecution of Diocletian raged in 304 AD. The emperor's edict obliged every Christian without distinction to offer sacrifice to the emperor and the gods. It is the teaching of the gospel that Christians are not to seek martyrdom. Christ said, quote, "When they persecute you in one city, flee into another," end quote. And St. Polycarp wrote in 156 AD, quote, "We do not commend those who volunteer to come forward, since this is not the teaching of the Gospels. Martyrdom was to take place according to the will of God," end quote. It was with this in mind that Maximina and Montanus fled the community at Belgrade and started towards Sirmium, about 40 miles distant. They were overtaken by Roman soldiers and led to stand trial on a high bridge above the Sava River. Probus, governor of Pannonia, was the judge who tried them. The captives were given the choice of rejecting Christ or rejecting life. History records the bravery of Montanus, though heroism in a priest was to be expected. What deeply moved the great crowd gathered on that bridge was the fidelity and apostolic courage of Maximina. In fact, she defended her faith so well that Probus quickly terminated the trial. The sentence was death by beheading, to be carried out immediately. The sword flashed. Montanus was beheaded first, head and body falling into the Sava. A moment after, St. Maximina laid down her life in the same way. The remains were lovingly removed from the river a few kilometers distant from Sirmium, and transported to Rome, to the catacomb of St. Priscilla, where they were interred. Here the relics remain for 1,500 years. In 1804, many tombs in St. Priscilla's were opened, and the relics were presented to the churches of Rome and elsewhere. With the special permission of Pope Pius VII, the relics of St. Maximina, with a vial of her blood, were presented to the Sinibaldi family, and placed in the altar of their private chapel. For more than 100 years they were venerated in this chapel. In 1927, the Sinibaldi family presented the relics to the Poor Clares of San Lorenzo. They, in turn, with permission of Pope Pius XI, sent them to the Poor Clares in Chicago in 1929. By a special rescript dated June 18, 1929, the Sacred Congregation of Rites declared these relics to be truly those of St. Maximina, martyr. For 40 years, St. Maximina had a place of honor in the relic chapel of the Chicago monastery. When the Poor Clares moved to Hickory Hills, the relics were given to Father Joseph Loro for his missions in South America. However, because of the illness of Father Loro, the relics were given into the custody of Father Leo McNamara of St. Adrian's Parish in Chicago. Father McNamara rightly felt that St. Maximina provided a much-needed example, and he did all in his power to make her known. The response was unprecedented. Many clients claimed to have received favors through the intercession of the martyr. Possibly the greatest consequence of devotion to her has been the impact of her example. In our time of confusion and defection, the visible presence, so to say, of the remains of a woman who confronted evil with courage and gave her young life for Christ has given countless people the desire to live by faith. There can be no doubt that St. Maximina has charm, and she seems also to have great influence over those who invoke her. The next chapter in the saga of St. Maximina has been her trip to Ohio, where she is currently safeguarded by the Byzantine Poor Clares at the Monastery of Holy Protection in North Royalton, Ohio. For various reasons, one of which was the death of Father Loro in 1971, it seemed best that she return to those who had guarded her for so long. The sisters had undertaken a Byzantine foundation and had settled in the Byzantine Catholic Diocese of Parma, Ohio. With the gracious permission of the Bishop, Most Reverend Emil J. Mihalik, the relic of St. Maximino, along with the relic of another young Roman martyr, St. Hyacinth, 109 AD, were relocated to a shrine on the monastery grounds. The relics of St. Maximina were transported on a ship from Italy in 1929, with the relics of two other saints, St. Hyacinth, the young Roman soldier who was martyred in 109 AD, and an 8-year-old child martyr, St. Innocent, from the 2nd century. Upon arrival in Chicago, Illinois, the skeletons were taken to the Prado Studios in Chicago to make the wax figures around the bones of the saints. According to one of the now deceased Poor Clare sisters, who was assigned caretaker of the relics for her entire religious life, quote, "Of the 3 skeletons, St. Maximina's remains were the most intact. The relic includes her entire skull as well." End quote. The hair on St. Maximina's figure was originally taken from a Roman Poor Clare nun in the early 1930s, whose hair was cut for her dressing ceremony upon her profession. The bones of St. Maximina were set in 1929 through 1930 using mucilage, a light brown adhesive. It was an old, antiquated adhesive used in the original setting of the bone of relics. Over time, the adhesive darkened and deteriorated. By the 1950s and afterwards, mucilage was not used because it did discolor. The sisters could not remove all the old adhesive for fear they would cause damage to the bones. This is the substance visible around the hand bones of St. Maximino. The sister who gave this information helped to make the current garments St. Maximina is wearing. She said it is the second set of garments to be displayed on the wax creation. She didn't say what became of the first outfit, nor do I have a photo of the original garment. At the Poor Clare's convent in Chicago in the late 1950s, a fresh flower arrangement on the top of the crypt caused water damage to the inside. There was a 2-year process to get approval from Rome to open the case and fix the issue. There were no fresh flowers allowed on the crypt after that. It was on March 5, 1959, that Albert Cardinal Meyer authenticated the seal of the crypt, which is still intact today. The vial of blood originally stored in the catacomb of St. Priscilla with the body of St. Maximina is authentic, and it is sealed inside her crypt in a reliquary. The blood has been known to liquefy on occasion. In the late 1960s, the Poor Clare's convent in Chicago was in disrepair and in need of relocating. An extern nun, named Sister Joseph, contacted Cardinal Cody to ask him what should be done with the relics of some of the Poor Clare nuns and the relics of St. Hyacinth and St. Maximina. He said, "Just bury them." Instead, the sisters called Father Leo McNamara to see if he could take St. Maximina. He said, "I'd be delighted. I can have her for my secretary." Father McNamara called an undertaker friend to help him relocate the body, but he also wanted the paperwork proving the relics are first class. He asked Sister Joseph to go get the documents. Sister Joseph had poor, sore feet and was reluctant to climb the steps to the 3rd floor of the convent to get the paperwork. Upon the urging of Father McNamara, she did retrieve the papers. When she came back down the stairs, her feet were miraculously healed. She wrote a letter of thanksgiving to Father McNamara. Father McNamara wanted St. Maximina to be located in the church at St. Adrian's, so the people could have access to venerate her. But the head priest at the time, Father John Jordan, wouldn't allow it. Instead, St. Maximina came to rest on some cabinets in Father McNamara's office area at St. Adrian's, opposite the hallway where he had living quarters located behind the main altar of the church. Many people visited her there, and Father McNamara was instrumental in spreading devotion to her. He told many people, "St. Maximina is the saint of great faith." A few statues have been made of St. Maximina that I know of. This version, created by a sculptor in Mexico at the request of some of Father McNamara's friends, is made to the likeness of her relic. Notice that her legs are parallel. It has been said that when the relic was given to Father McNamara, her legs were not posed as they are today in her crypt, slightly bent with the left foot partially crossed over the right foot. Hopefully someone has an earlier photograph to verify her posture, and of course the documentation from the sealing of her crypt in 1959 would reveal this information, if we had access to it. At the time St. Maximino was relocated to Ohio in the early 1970s, her legs were bent. Father McNamara was asked about her change in posture at the time. According to one eyewitness, he said, "It may be due to humidity and the changes in temperature, or she is simply making herself at home." The second of the two St. Maximina statues that have been made to my knowledge is pictured here. The artist was Edward Gorin, who made the statue around 1966 or 1968, according to a lady who knew him. Mr. Gorin died in 1976 and is buried with his wife in the Douglas Cemetery. The story goes that Mr. Gorin had a vision of St. Maximina standing in his stairway. He created the sculpture to the likeness he saw. This medal was made in both a silver and gold tone, and was once distributed widely among Father Mac's friends. He also had a yearly calendar printed in St. Maximina's honor to spread devotion to her. Even after his death, some of the faithful carried on this promise. A news article from the Detroit Free Press, State Edition, of Wednesday, May 13, 1970 says, Monday was the annual celebration of the feast of St. Maximina. On the eve before her feast, the 83-year-old priest who founded the church more than 60 years ago said he discovered a watery blood liquid had oozed from the neck, hands, and feet of the relic. An article from the Leaves magazine, published by the Marian Hill Fathers, Detroit, Michigan, Volume 38, January-February 1972, Number 1, gave more information. It reads about Father McNamara's response to the event. Quote, "Look at it yourself and draw your own conclusions. I think what is happening is that she is appearing now as the great leader of saints. I think she is doing this to draw attention to herself." According to one source, a news reporter examined the bleeding and told Father McNamara that he did not believe it was real blood. Father McNamara told him, "Maybe so, but why then does the blood flow upward rather than down?" They spoke about St. Maximina having been beheaded, and her remains rejoined. At the wound in her neck was visible blood. It began to flow upward from her body to her forehead in a clear stream, in defiance of gravity. The newspaper man's story was never published. This article from The Economist newspaper, dated Sunday, May 17, 1970, is entitled "Barred from View." It states about the unusual changes in the relic. Since then, the miracles have been questioned by the pastor, the Reverend John Jordan, and other Catholic Church authorities. Public viewing of the bleeding martyr has been banned by church officials. Believers of the miracle of St. Maximina say they are not as angry that the pastor has halted viewing as they are as furious that the Reverend Leo McNamara, pastor in residence, who kept the relic in his office, might be hurt. At least Father McNamara acts in the capacity of a priest. He has helped more people than can be counted, even without miracles, said one longtime parishioner. One woman said, "At least in this age of wars and strife, he got the people out of the house and into the church. He renewed the religious convictions of all who came in contact with him, and he didn't even need a miracle to do that." Father John Jordan, who, along with the Chicago Catholic Archdiocese Chancery Office, decided that the church was turning into a sideshow by the large number of persons coming to look at the blood on the relic, was called, among other things, a poor Christian, for closing down the office and calling the blood a hoax. A reader of the Wanderer newspaper, as written in June 25, 1970 edition, asks, "Why have the changes in the relics of St. Maximino been branded a hoax?" The response in the column our readers ask was, "What is important in a discussion of the reported change in the bones is that Cardinal Meyer canonically sealed the casket and allowed the relics to be publicly venerated. What appears to be an extraordinary change in the bones is not of great moment. This change could be a natural phenomenon, which no one should dispute, but to say it is passed off as a hoax is inexcusable. The evidence is not clear. Those who have observed the phenomenon have no reason for sensationalism or deception. They saw a change had taken place." There are many unanswered questions about the span of time the relics of St. Maximino were located at St. Adrian's Church. Sadly, these questions may never be answered. It is odd, though, that the Chicago Archdiocese didn't take more of an interest in the relics of such a special saint. Father Leo McNamara came to know that Cardinal Cody wished to confiscate the relic of St. Maximino and have the remains buried in an ordinary grave. The question is, why? Prior to his death in 1973, Father McNamara saw to the relocation of the relics from the city of Chicago to Ohio. St. Maximina has been safeguarded by the Byzantine Poor Clare nuns and offered to the public for veneration for more than 40 years. If anyone has information to add regarding St. Maximina or Father McNamara, please comment or message me under the About tab. Thanks for watching this video. God bless you.